What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're gonna be working on the 2GR swap some more. There's only 3 things that need to happen before we can take this car on its maiden voyage. Number 1, which is what we'll be doing in today's video, and that's installing the drive-by-wire pedal. Number 2, we have to fix the RPM gauge on this car. Technically, that doesn't have to happen before we take it on a trip, but we want a working RPM gauge. And then number 3, which really sucks, I think we have to drop the transmission on this car. The other day, my girlfriend and I were bleeding out the cooling system, and for about the first 20 minutes, everything was going perfectly fine. The engine ran really well until this. I noticed what smelled like burning oil, and I noticed that there was a steady oil drip coming from between the transmission and engine. I haven't cleaned it off yet, but you could actually still see some of it right there. My theory at the moment is that the rear main seal is probably leaking. Now that is something I replaced before putting this engine in the car, which means I likely just didn't install it properly, so it was user error on my end. It is possible that I got a bad seal right from the factory, but just from personal experience, it's usually installation error and not just like a bad seal. Before I drop the transmission though, I'm gonna make sure and do my due diligence and look at this side of the engine to see if there's any leaks on the top end, because I would hate to unnecessarily drop the transmission when it was just something like there is a leak up here. And there could be a couple areas, so that's something that I'll diagnose and dive deeper to on a different day. Now we're gonna get on to the installation. So what I have here is a drive-by-wire pedal sensor. It's had this rod put on from Frankenstein Motor Works. This is the pigtail that came with my wiring harness. One end will connect to the pedal in there, and then I'll have to route it all the way to the trunk. I also purchased this bracket from Frankenstein Motor Works, which will allow me to bolt this sensor directly onto or into this chassis without modifying anything. And then you'll notice this doesn't have a face on it. So I went ahead and bought this pedal separately, and that has a little hole there. It'll attach there, but we'll worry about that part later. I want to start off by routing the wiring. I did Google how other people route the wiring harness, and there is a couple of different ways that came up. There's one person who did a write-up, and in their write-up, what they ended up doing was they ran it from the trunk into the engine bay. They went above the fuel tank, and then if you come all the way to the front, there's this access point right there. So the wire came out there, and then from there, they looped it into the cab and were able to connect it. If I can find that write-up, I'll link to it in the description down below. The other way that I saw was I found a post from Mark from Frankenstein Motor Works from years ago, and he mentioned that he routed it just the same way that the gas cable goes. So I'm assuming it goes from here. I know the gas cable then routes up, goes through here. So it'll go underneath this quarter panel, if that makes sense. And then if you come onto this side, there's a little cavity and the wire should loop around there. I'm gonna take the approach that Mark mentioned in that post. And if I can find that post again, I'll link to that in the description down below so you can read through it as well. My goal is to avoid taking apart the complete interior. I don't think that's gonna be necessary. I think I'll just take the driver's side seat out. And then from there, I should be able to just remove this trim, pull the carpet up a little bit, and then I'll need to remove this guy right here, which I think is just held in with some screws, I don't remember correctly, and take this side piece off, and that should give me the room to run the wiring. We are making pretty good progress at this point. So I removed this trim, the cubby over here, and then this cover as well. Just be careful when removing this piece. I'm kind of bummed about it, but I cracked it right there, as you can see. So you want to be careful about that type of stuff. This is, 30-year-old plastic at this point. Another thing to know, and I didn't realize I hadn't done this on this car yet, is that they come with this like foam material in this portion, and people say that this can help retain moisture and can be a source of rust. A lot of people just take it out, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do that since I'm already here. Get as much of it out as possible, or let's see if it even will come out. I'm gonna end up moving this out of the way. It's just a couple bolts, one right there, and that's gonna make it easier to route the stuff. So when I remove this, that's when I'll pull that out. After removing that additional stuff out of the way, I decided to take just a quick little break. The main reason for that is I didn't really see a clear way that I'd be able to run the harness through there. This is the hole, or this is the cable for the fuel cap. Yes, it theoretically could fit through there, but I think long term there would be issues with rubbing and whatnot, so I don't want to stick it through there. I don't see any other holes here. I did a quick Google search because I do recall that people would use that area like as a wire tuck, and so they would just drill a hole through there, and that would allow them to run the body harness from the cabin on the inside or behind this quarter panel, but not in the engine bay, if that makes sense, because you have the outer skin here and then you have the inner skin here, and there's a cavity in there, and then that allows them to go directly to the trunk. And right there's actually the cavity where it would come through. I didn't feel like drilling another hole, so I went ahead and actually just emailed Doug, the guy from Wire Gap, who I bought the harness from in the first place, and I asked him like, how does he route the harness to the cabin? He got back to me almost instantly, but what he told me is I go behind the driver's side quarter panel, then through the body harness grommet, along the firewall, then under the center console and dash. So the way that I interpret that is that he's gonna go in the cavity that's behind the quarter panel here, and then he'll go into the body harness. But obviously that's not going to work in my case because I'm not doing the wire tuck. So what I've decided to do instead is I'm going to run it just through here. I'm gonna poke a little hole in the top of this grommet right here, and I should be able just to slide it on through. I did attempt to actually undo the tape here, but it was so brittle that it just started breaking off and stuff like that. And then with how old the wiring is, the more that I can just leave this alone and in place, I'd much rather prefer that, so I don't risk breaking anything. That's how I'll get it into the cab. And to get it from the engine bay to the trunk, what I've decided to do is same thing. I'll just poke a little hole in this grommet here for the body harness. I did think about doing this one over here, but if I ever have to pull the engine out of the car or anything like that, that's just going to add some extra complexity to it, so I'll do the body harness instead and leave this one alone. At this point, I think we're ready to start running the wiring. I went ahead and put some of the conduit on, so that's all set. Don't have to worry about that. I did make sure to get something that would be that's acceptable to use in an engine bay, so that's really important. So yeah, with that, let's just get started. I started by using a pick to very carefully poke a hole in the grommet, making sure I didn't mess up any of the wiring. I had an old e-brake cable and I taped that to the pigtail. I did that so I could pull the pigtail through. Unfortunately, that didn't work because it was just too bulky in my situation. So I ended up just pushing the pigtail through on the other end. I was then able to route it through the engine bay, along the body harness, and popped it through into the trunk. The cable's been ran. What I'll do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and connect this, and then I'll route the wiring. I'm going to go under the dash, through this kick panel, through right here, which already has some wiring. It'll go into the engine bay, and on this side of things, it's going to be routed along the body harness. At least that's the goal. So it'll be like this essentially. And then in here, I'll clean up the little bit of wiring that's here. There's not really too much. It's just a simple matter of taping some things up and then securing it to the wall there. Assembly of the drive-by-wire sensor is going to be, well, super simple. This is the sensor itself. I purchased the kit from Frankenstein Motor Works, not a sponsorship. It came with the rod pre-installed. If you decide to buy this separately, you'll have to install the rod yourself, but I chose to buy it from him. The one thing that I did get separately was the pedal face, and this looks like it's just going to slide into place. It is a snug fit though, so just something to be aware of. Lines up with this hole right here, may be a little hard to see. And from here, the pedal that I bought actually came with this little metal rod insert. So I think I just put that in, and then this thing is ready to go in the car. The pedal is attached, and to be totally transparent with you guys, I actually walked away for a minute, then had to come back to it because I got a little frustrated. This pin is a really, really tight fit, which makes sense because you don't want that coming off when you're driving, because that wouldn't be a good time. So what I ended up doing was I took a little punch and then I just hammered it in using that, and it went on in. So we're at the point now where we can install this. To remove the pedal, it seems like I just have to undo a 10 mil bolt there, and then up there is where the throttle cable attaches, so I'll have to undo those as well. It looks like there's just a couple 10 mil, so we'll get that knocked out. That is not the funnest space to work in. It's super tight in there, but we did get the stuff out. So right here is the throttle pedal. One of the things you may have noticed is that, well, this is the throttle cable and that it's just cut. A while back when I was removing it, I decided to just cut it because I didn't know of anyone that needed a 5S throttle cable, and let's be honest, people really don't want parts for a 5S. There is this second bracket that I took off, and let's say that you're pulling the throttle cable out without cutting it like I did, you'll also need to take this off at the same time. I don't think I'm gonna put this back in. I think there is a stop here, which I'm assuming was for the throttle cable. I'm honestly not certain, to be frank with you guys, but I don't think I'm gonna need this. If anything, it does leave a hole in the firewall. I'll show you guys that right now. Right behind the heater core line right here, there is a little hole, and that's where the throttle cable went into. So I think I'll probably just end up getting a grommet just to fill that hole. I think we're at the point where we can start putting the interior back together. So I just put the pedal in there. It bolted right into place. Really the trickiest thing is that there's just not much room to work with in there, but I was able to manage it. So that's good to go. You'll notice that I put this panel on right here. And I did that because I decided to run the harness through here. And I wanted to make sure that this would fit. So this looks pretty good. No worries here. This is my fault. I wasn't careful when I was taking it apart initially, and I broke it, which that just sucks. This is 30-year-old plastic, so things are gonna happen, but I wanna try to keep it as nice as possible. Aside from a little confusion, I will say I think things have gone pretty well overall so far. I am running a little bit behind though, and that's a bit of an issue just because I have plans with my girlfriend. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna end up throwing the seat, the cover, and then this trim piece back on off camera, and then we'll pick it up on the first start, because I just wanna make sure that everything still works as it should. The seat's still not in the car, but that's okay. I wanna go ahead and just test fire it just to make sure that everything's gonna be good. So battery's hooked up, the back trim is in and everything like that. Intake is back on, the MAF's connected. Also, I didn't show this because it's kind of just, you know, well, straightforward. A lot of the wiring and whatnot has been zip tied into place. Let's see if she starts, which I assume she should. Boom. That's amazing. The throttle is super, super touchy. Like, feels pretty good. One of the things that's gonna take some getting used to is the fact that the throttle pedal has very little resistance. I'm used to, well, I guess a lot more. I mean, like the throttle pedal in this car, for example, is very, very heavy, and that's something that I prefer versus this setup, which is not heavy at all. It's super light. Also, how quickly the car revs up, that's actually kind of surprising because it is, I mean, it's literally a stock engine with just your basic bolt-ons. So I guess that's really all I got for this video. Hopefully it was helpful, and just know that the way that I routed it's not the only way. As I mentioned earlier in the video, you can do it above the gas tank. You can go the route of the center console. You can also use or choose to run it in the cavity that's underneath the driver's side quarter panel. So you have lots of different ways to do it. I just kind of figured I'd make this video because when I was looking, there really wasn't much out there, and I know that it's a pretty straightforward thing, but I still thought someone would find it helpful because I'm a very visual person. I know that if before I did this, if I had like a step-by-step or some video that I could watch, that's something that I would have appreciated. So thanks for watching, stick around. I think we have 2 more videos before we get to do the maiden voyage on this car. We still have to do the RPM gauge or fix the tachometer. And then I still have to diagnose and figure out why there's a leak coming from between the transmission and the engine. Again, I do think it's the rear main seal, but that's gonna be a problem for another day. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.